I'm tired and I'm slightly irritated, so let's talk about Brisingr, okay? So I've been talking to a couple of friends about my feelings about this book, and the only thing that I can accurately say, just like 100%, is that I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted. Yet, I feel like the more that I say that I'm conflicted about this book, the less conflicted I become. The truth is that I just didn't really jive with this. I didn't love this book. My friend Jen from the Book Refuge told me that originally books 3 and 4 were not split into 2 books. They were originally 1 book, and you can really tell that within Brisingr. And I think the reason that he split these 2 books up is because he felt like he had a lot to say and a lot of things to tie up, which I can completely understand, but I feel like the loose ends that we were tying up in Brisingr, they didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. This book was filled with a lot of meandering. The first couple of chapters I was so excited about because we start off with a bang. We're going after the Razak. It's very exciting. We get battles. We have some closure and some situations that were brought up in books 1 and 2. You know, we're starting to see this progression of the plot. And after Eldest, which was my favorite and still is my favorite of the books that I've read in the series so far, I thought that the plot would continue to pick up. I thought that we were, building to this great war that we were going to be fighting against this evil emperor, and, things were going to start happening, but they just didn't happen in this book. After the first couple of chapters, we took a massive dive in terms of pacing, and that pacing didn't really pick up until about the 65-70% mark of this book, and I feel like during that time where we were really just slow going plot-wise, nothing really happened. This book has a secondary title, and I'm trying to find it. The 7 Promises of Aragon Shadeslayer and Saphira Bjartskuller. Even listening to the audiobook, I cannot pronounce that. Anyway, the promises, okay? Both Aragon and Saphira have made promises to different people, and them fulfilling their promises is Brisingr, okay? At certain points, there are definitely some really good scenes in here. Some of my favorite scenes of the series are in Brisingr. So that's why I keep saying that I'm feeling conflicted about this book, because I feel like some of the best moments of the series are in Brisingr. But also, I think Paolini's weaknesses show very clearly in Brisingr, okay? Aragon had a little bit of a pacing issue. That was one of my main issues with book 1. I felt like we had kind of fixed that in book 2, but I feel like Brisingr calls attention to those same pacing issues that I had in book 1, but to the umpteenth degree. Aragon is contemplating life a lot. He's contemplating the purpose of life. He's contemplating punishment. He's contemplating my sneezes. Aragon is very introspective. I talked about this in my review for Eldest. I thought it was a pro in Eldest because in Aragon, he's a very impulsive teenager. He does a lot of things without thinking clearly. He's very aggressive in his actions, and he doesn't really think things through before acting upon, things. But in Eldest, through the things that he learns through his training, he becomes a lot more introspective, and he starts to care about life. He starts to think about the world around him in a deeper way. However, in Brisingr, I feel like that is to the detriment, because Aragon throughout the first 50% of this book is thinking. That's all he's doing. He's thinking about thinking, he's contemplating, and he's contemplating his contemplations. And I was so bored. Some of these chapters in here are so just disgustingly long. I mean, in the audiobook, some of these chapters are like over an hour long. There's no reason for them to be that long. There's no reason for this book that is, fulfilling the promises that they made to be 750 pages. There's no reason for it to be that long. And I feel like that is my main complaint. All of my little smaller complaints, the pacing, the, lack of plot progression, because we really didn't progress the plot in here. This is literally just Aragon and Saphira fulfilling promises, and my copy does not have that secondary title in it. So, when Jen told me that, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense because that's all we're doing. It all falls under the umbrella of this book was way too long. And I can totally understand why Paolini wanted to split these 2 books up. I have not yet read book 4. I've never read it before, but it is 850 pages. So I can totally see within like page-wise, word count, why he would want to split these 2 up. Most of the events in this book happen at the very beginning and at the very end. So within that, you have about like 500 pages worth of filler where Aragon is just going around and fulfilling these promises that he's made made throughout books 1 and 2. Like I said, some of these scenes in here are so well written, they're so good, but they're few and far between. And I felt like we just kept going on and on and on about Aragon thinking, because of course, some of those conversations, like the quality of life, is a carryover from book 2, but also he's faced with having to make a decision about somebody's punishment. You know, that is a new thing, and I enjoyed that sort of conversation, but I feel like they were just dragged into oblivion. And I think that the plot points that Paolini did have in here were really good, and they helped further the plot, but they were unrecognizable in the sense that they were just so far bloated. One thing that I did mention in my previous reviews is that Paolini does love a good detail, and he does. He's very descriptive, he's very detail-oriented, but I feel like that was to the detriment of the story in this one. I feel like Paolini lost his plot within all of the details, and I was just left completely unsatisfied. I'm so unsatisfied by this, and it makes me so upset because I liked Eldest. I really, really liked Eldest. And I had so many expectations for what book 3 would bring that I just feel so let down. I did mention this in my Eldest review as well. I had a fear that some of the little details that I was enjoying in Eldest were going to be kind of superfluous going forward, like they weren't really going to matter in the story as a whole. And I feel like in Brisingr that is the case, not for everything, but for some things. And because Paolini loves a good detail, and because he is so descriptive in his writing, that just added to the length of everything. Everything just felt even more bloated. However, I don't want this to be a rant review because I do have some really positive feelings about this book as well. So let's talk about some of those. So my main complaints about book 2 were the romance, which it's dialed down a little bit in this book, but I still feel like these characters are just so overwhelmingly horny. All of the single characters are looking at these couples and they're wanting what they have, and I'm like, there's a war going on. We're preparing for a war. There's bigger fish to fry here, okay? And my other big complaint about book 2 were like the lack of battle details and lame character deaths. I'm not going to talk about any character deaths within book 3, but I do want to say that both of those things have improved, especially within the first couple of chapters. We are immediately within a battle scene, and I feel like it was already just improved exponentially. I felt like it was more exciting, it was more intense, I could follow it a lot better. So I do feel like Paolini is continuing to improve in those weak spots that I saw in book 1 and book 2. There is some characters that really stood out for me in this book. Number 1 is Roran. Roran is my number 1. I loved him in Eldest. I love him in Brisingr. He is one of my favorite parts of this series, like 100%. I just love his character. And I think in Brisingr, he steps more and more into this kind of leadership role, and he starts to become a man that other people are eager to follow. I mean, we see this happening in book 2 with the exodus of Carvajal, but we see it come together in book 3 as Roran has finally joined the Varden. I also really liked his relationship with Katrina in this book. I feel like in books 1 and 2, we didn't really get to see a lot of them like interacting with each other. So I really didn't understand why we were supposed to care about Katrina, why we cared what happened to her. I feel like her character was a little bit underdeveloped until book 3, but they have some really, really good scenes back and forth, and we get to see a little bit of a sassy Katrina, which I always love. In this book, we really get to see their relationship continue to develop. That was one of the weaker points in Roran's character development, was he had this really important relationship with Katrina. They were in love, but we didn't really see a lot of them interacting together, and I feel like that is remedied in this. And that's one of the benefits that I would say of this kind of slow pace, really descriptive, meandering plot, is that we get a little bit more of character interactions, which I always love. So that's a huge plus. And I also really like that we get to see kind of like a different side of Aragon. He's being put in these difficult situations and having to actually kill people, and he's finding himself slightly enjoying the control that he has over other human beings. And I find that kind of like little bit of that little glimpse of a dark side of Aragon I really, really loved. NotSoAverageJo is another real standout for me in this book. I liked her in book 2, but I really started to love her in book 3. She's a very complicated character because she's kind of between a rock and a hard place when it comes to caring about the Varden and caring about the cause, and also caring about the individual people within the Varden. She's kind of having to make these big decisions that are not going to make everybody happy or even anybody happy, but she does it for the betterment of the cause or for the betterment of the people around her as a whole. I really think that she is such a good character, and her development in here is the one that really shines for me. And from her POV, we kind of see a little bit more of the political maneuverings. We see her trying to not overstep or step on anyone's toes and navigating through this wider political world that we haven't really gotten to see before this. Angela is another character that I just really enjoy. I continue to love her character. She's one of the side characters that we don't see on every single page, but I just love her so much. She's kind of like the Luna Lovegood of this series, and I just find her so compelling. She's funny, she's dry, she's a little bit weird. You don't really know what the hell she's talking about most of the time, but she always pops in with something interesting to say. And she's got a very mysterious background that I just want to know more about. I want to sink my teeth into Angela's story, okay? That is one of the characters that I just want more of, and I hope that we do get more of Angela in book 4. Oramus and Glader are two characters that I feel like I need to talk about together. We meet them in book 2. I loved them in book 2. I love them even more in book 3. We don't see a ton of them in this book, but the bits that we do see of them makes me love them even more. I just kind of want to crawl inside of their brains and just pick around for a while because they just have so much knowledge about the world and so much to share and so much life experience. Saphira and Aragon are kind of middle of the road for me. I'm not completely in love with them, but I do like them quite a bit. And as the story goes on, I like them even more. Saphira especially. I feel like within Brisingr, we really get to see that bond with Dragon and Ryder because there is a portion of this book where Aragon and Saphira are separated. So we get to see how deep that bond and that relationship really goes into their soul, who they are as a person. They're two parts, two halves of one soul. And so when you take one away and you separate them, they kind of feel like they're half of a being. And I really, really loved what Paolini did with that. So overall, I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted in the sense that I genuinely did not enjoy the majority of this book. I was bored, but also in the same breath, some of these scenes are just so dang good. And they're so well written and they're so fun and just exciting. Some of them are even surprisingly dark, which I think I said about book 1. I'm continuously surprised by how dark some of these scenes can be. I do think that after I read book 4, I can kind of look back at this book in hindsight and see how Paolini set up book 4. But as of this moment, I just didn't really love it. I didn't love it as much as book 2. I didn't even really like it as much as book 1. And I feel like Paolini could have definitely cut down this book by about 300 pages, and I would have liked it a lot more. Yeah, that's how I feel about Brisingr. I'm sorry if I've upset anybody. So I'm hoping book 4 is not a repeat of book 3. I'm hoping it's more of the same vein as book 2, but we'll see. We'll see. I have hope still left in my heart for this series, and I'm eager to wrap it up because I want to know how the story is going to end. Paolini can definitely resurrect my love for the series if book 4 does fulfill what I want it to fulfill, what I need it to fulfill at this point, but we'll have to see. We shall have to see. Please let me know down below if you feel the same. If you don't, let me know that as well. We can chat about it. Just be nice to me and don't eat my head off, okay? But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you have not already. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.